This is episode 3. I'm joined with my buddies, Matthew and Stephen. So,
why do you always say Matthew's name first? I'm wondering.
I'm joined by Stephen, the Great.
That's so much better.
Now I'm offended. Now I'm bothered.
Don't worry. The last 2 times you mentioned your name first. So.
Yeah. So episode 2 was about clearing the soil. Basically, getting rid of things that maybe are distractions in your life. This episode, we want to focus on pruning, but effective pruning. So today, it's how do we correct and how we're corrected, and then the difference between encouragement and judgment. So we kind of want to talk through those because pruning helps you grow. Judgment kind of tears you down. And so that's what I wanted us to focus on today, thinking about. And I know biblically there's always this discussion around judgment and things like that. I don't want to get into all of that necessarily. Did Jesus judge, or is he? I have my stance on that. Today, though, what I wanted us to focus on is just the benefits of pruning, how you guys handle it, either in work or in personal life. And when I say handle it, I mean, like, how do you take pruning when people do it, and how do you give? Because I think it's really important. So what I guess we could start off with is, when we say pruning, what does that actually look like to you guys in real life when I say pruning?
I feel like there's an implication that it involves some amount of pain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not a great process.
A hardship of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think most people think, if negative or positive. To me, it's like, oh, pruning, that's a negative. That there's going to be some, like you said, some suffering or something that's involved in that.
Yeah, you're going to lose some limbs.
Yeah. No, that is true. And I think about it because, like, probably one of the, and you guys know, I don't know if you have, like, in your position, do you have people that work, like, on your team or under
Yes.
you that you have to?
Yeah.
So, and I know you do. Sometimes that's one of the most difficult things is being able to help people grow by telling them the hard things, but in a way, I liken it to the sandwich method, where you say something good and then something negative and then something good again.
The Revelation 3-4
Yes.
method.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with that sometimes because it's just hard to prune, and it's also work. Like when you think about pruning a tree, we won't prune the plastic tree here, but when you prune, there is work, and you got to do it the right way. Otherwise,
have you read the book by Kim Scott, Radical Candor? Mm-mm. That's actually a really good book. I mean, the subject or the content is what it sounds like, right? It's about being candid, and it talks a lot about this, about giving instruction or direction, or in some cases, having to correct people or give them that guidance. But coming back to your question about how, I think the worst thing you can be is insincere and fake in it, right? Number one, so direct, being as direct as you possibly can and candid as you can, I think is always the best approach, right? It's the hardest because it requires you as the person giving it to be very direct and very specific. But there's also, what's her name? Brene Brown. Mm-hmm. She has a famous quote, which is, clear is kind, right? The clearer you can be to people, the kinder you ultimately are, right? It's those people, because we've all received this kind of feedback, which is like, kind of going to give you some feedback and tell you what you're not doing well, but I'm kind of not really going to tell you what you're not doing well. I'm just going to tell you you're not doing something well. You're going to let you kind of figure it out. And that's the worst kind. It's like, I've left meetings before with bosses in some cases where I would have said to him, like, I don't even know what you just told me. Like, what exactly, what specifically, clearly is it that you want me to do better, different, and new? And so again, I think just being candid and being clear when giving that, I think is paramount in any relationship, right?
Yeah.
Kids, work, whatever if you're a pastor, whatever that is.
Pointing at me. You said a word though that stood out, and I was thinking about it. You said relationship. So I was thinking during this whole process, the times in my life where someone has corrected me, if I have a relationship with them and I know they care about me, then I'm more likely to listen to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then vice versa, like, different people on my team or whatever, if I just come in and they don't even know who I am or haven't built that relationship, so they're like, who's this guy? Versus, okay, this is someone, yeah, he's been there, he's done it. Mm-hmm. He wants me to succeed. I trust him. I'll listen to this correction. So that to me, that relationship piece is really big.
It is.
And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, absolutely agree. And, I've had a number of different, mentors or bosses in the past. And the one that I had very early in life, he probably gave me the hardest instruction and correction that I've received from anyone. Extremely direct. He was a little Italian Sicilian guy, right? Mm-hmm. Very direct, very to the point. You knew exactly what he was thinking all the time. But that wasn't the relationship. That wasn't the definition of the relationship. The definition of the relationship was he took time to understand me. He took time to talk to me. He took time to help, all these other things. So that leaves space in a relationship where trust can be built, and that time of correction or instruction can actually happen. I think it's very harmful if you can still have a relationship with people, but if the relationship that we have with people, whether it be, subordinates or things of that nature, if the relationship is just correction and just instruction, that's not a great relationship either. Mm-hmm. And so it really needs to be an overwhelmingly positive relationship first, so that you then have that space within that relationship to give that direct feedback. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, Matt, is take the 80, 90, 95% of the time in that relationship to build a positive relationship, mm-hmm. so that when you need to call on that 5%, which is maybe a more difficult conversation, hey, it's not, the person's not going to be sitting there questioning how you feel about them. Do you like them? Do you trust them? They already know that. And so they take what it is that you have to say in the context of that well-established trust-based relationship. Again, I've seen it being done the other way around.
Yeah.
So thinking about that then, though, what do you do to build those relationships? Is it, because I don't know how many people, I have 61 people on my team at UNT, for instance. I don't necessarily have the ability or the time, maybe over a period of time, go to lunch with them and things like that. I try to do those kind of things. But I personally, and I've always been this type of person, I try to make sure that I reach out to people and say, hey, good job. Or I just appreciate you being here and you doing the things that you're doing. So that then when I do have to say, hey, what happened here? It's not, like you said, he only comes around or she only comes around to give me that negative input, that negative feedback. Because that for me, I will shut down. If that's all they ever do is like, hey, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? I'll be like, do you realize I did like 37 other things? Some of them aren't even my job. So that's one of the things that I personally try to do is make sure that people know it doesn't. I think what you're saying is you got to get to know people and they need to know that you care. It doesn't mean you have to go to movies and go to lunch and hang out every day with them, but they need to know that they're there for me in the good times and the bad. Because otherwise, I don't think your feedback will be taken. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys ever read the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent book for me and for any team, really, because you got to have that trust. Because if you don't have trust, you won't be able to accomplish things. Because if people don't really think that they can believe what you're saying or that they know you've got their back and things like that.
Doesn't Lencioni even have like a trust formula in that book where he kind of actually tries to like build almost a mathematic formula of how you build trust?
Yeah. And he's got this little pyramid thing and you got to kind of step through it. And I forget, there's like, you got to have trust, then you can have conflict, then you have buy-in, then you see results.
Yeah.
It kind of works its way through. So where do you guys experience correction the most? Work, home, or leadership? Like, I mean, kind of. I'm not talking.
I feel like honestly at this stage, it's probably, and this sounds funny, maybe you'll be surprised. I feel like at home. I feel like, with Betsy, my wife, we talked about our wives, I think on episode 1, but of just, she does a really good job of reminding me, even when I don't want to hear it, that I need to be a better man with whatever context that is. Right. And so, I feel like with my job, I'm the senior, I'm senior sales rep. So I know what I'm doing. People come to me. I don't get a lot of correction anymore on that, so I just think stage of life, it's more of like, all right, you're not in your 30s or 20s anymore. You should know better. Like we were talking beforehand, like, whatever it was with, having more patience or self-control, whatever it is, just, hey, be better.
Yeah.
You know what you should do and do it. So that's what comes in my mind now in my stage of life, of just trying to be a better person. And my wife reminding me of that.
Yeah.
I was going to say probably my associate pastor at church. Probably. I think you gave a sermon on that once. Be better, right? Was that you?
Be better.
Just be better.
Just be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would agree with what you had just said, right? Unfortunately, I mean, I know obviously both your wives, our wives know each other well. I think we're all, as men, blessed to kind of have those kinds of wives that are principled, who have kind of a, very intentional way about seeing, both a worldview and kind of seeing life for what it is. But then also, I think looking for those times and moments in a day to exercise that. And I won't even call it a correction, encouragement, suggestions. Hey, have you thought about that? So for sure, that happens probably a lot more frequently for me than it does for you guys, just because, not because that doesn't say anything about Veronica, it says a lot about me. I think there's a lot of things that I've really tried to iron out. And then I also think it's very, very useful to seek those things out professionally, to actually be in a situation where, like, okay, I'm going to, put myself out there and ask those questions. Have any of you guys done a 360 review?
Yeah.
So are you familiar with that?
Yeah. I know I've heard that.
And so we had that program available to a few leaders here a few years ago, where, and kind of I put my hand up. I was like, I'll do that. And it can be hard to hear some of the things from people, but at the same time, you appreciate the fact that they had the courage to give that, right? So I think it's situational. I think the static right now is probably at home, because we're all working to continue to do better and be better. And then it's situational at work, right? I think if you have a good boss, you should receive more of it than you used to.
Yeah. Well, I will say, Victoria, I mean, yeah, she'll give me advice, or sometimes I ask for it. Sometimes she just gives it. And it is, the thing that I will say is, she's probably, I'm going to say, the only person that I trust with everything.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I always didn't. I wasn't always like that. I grew up with trust issues. I just didn't trust people. I always figured they were out to do this, that, or the other. And I will say with her, I know that when she gives me advice or she says things, because she'll, I'll get upset at something at work, or somebody said this at church, or whatever the case, and she'll be like, well, maybe they meant it this way. I'm like, whatever. Take their side. But I do know the thing is I always feel like for in our relationship with Victoria and I, it's like, hey, we got Chris is this craggedy old messed up tree that needs a lot of pruning. She's this beautiful tree that's in the Garden of Eden. Nice branches, everything. But I think that for me is it kind of, I get correction sort of in multiple places. I do think what you say is right. When you think about work, it's more like, at this stage in the game, it isn't necessarily, hey, you need to be to work on time, or, it's more like, hey, why are we missing this timeline or this deadline or, those kind of things, which really isn't about correction, but it's more about, just making sure you're delivering. So why do you guys think, and maybe this is a question for me, but why do you guys think correction feels so personal? Like if somebody gives you kudos, you're like, oh, no, I appreciate it. But, you just kind of let it go and you feel good about it. But when somebody corrects you, it's like, for me anyways, it's like, oh man, I'm an idiot.
And so like to be clear, like for the purpose of definition, when you say correct, it's really just saying, hey, Chris, Matthew, Stephen, hey, I observed this trait in you, or this behavior in you, or this pattern in you. I would recommend adjusting. It's not always, because a correction can be also very, very negative, which is, hey, you used the wrong word in that sentence. That's not a real word, right? Which I think gets maybe a little bit more to your judgment piece. But what you're asking is, like when you say correction, you're really talking about, hey, instruction with the intent of helping grow, or are you talking about both?
Both, kind of. But because what it leads to is, I think sometimes you have to have a filter system, and we talked about this a little bit in other episodes, but you have to be able to understand sometimes people are trying to prune you and they really shouldn't. Yeah. You don't need their advice. Yeah. And it's not there to help you. It's just like if I went out and pruned a tree. Sometimes I have no idea what I'm doing. And
that's
like
so true.
Some trees, pretty simple and straightforward. Like at our other house, we had this tree that would grow these little roots all out of the bottom. That's easy. You just come in and snap, 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 and you prune them out. I don't know that I was helping anything, but I was definitely doing my job as the official pruner. So I think there's certain things that sometimes you have to have a filtering mechanism, because I do think when somebody does say something to you, maybe for me, hey, you're a little loud. You talk too much. You're always the center of attention, or things like that. I have to understand, okay, maybe they're right. Maybe I should listen more. Okay, I'll do that. But for me, it always does feel like, oh, I think partly for me, it's like embarrassing sometimes.
Yeah. I think I know for me, I don't think I think we're three pretty good guys, right? I think we try to live a moral life. We try to make good decisions. We follow God with the best of our ability. So when somebody points out, hey, you've fallen short, the initial instinct I've always had is why I don't want to think about that, because then I'm not perfect. There's things I need to work on, and that means I got to put work in, because if you're right, and I need to improve on that. So I think for me, the first instinct is always like, well, wait a second, I'm overall a pretty good guy. Like, is it really this big a deal? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, and then knowing that if that person's right, again, they can be trusted. I have a relationship, and once I think about it, okay, they're right, then I'm going to have to put work in, because I need to correct that, which is that pruning process.
Yes. Yeah.
But to your point, if the wrong person comes to your house to prune a tree, they can kill the tree.
Yes.
So it's to the point. It's got to come from the right people.
I had written down here, pruning is intentional correction meant to help someone grow, not tear them down. And I think that's the key. And if we remember that, and not everybody does, and I can tell you it's been a long time since I've gone after somebody, just to say something to cut them down. I used to have this side of me that if you pushed me too far, then I would just try to find whatever it is. There was this old lady when I was at Sam's Club. She was like I was 18 or 19. She was pretty old. I mean, probably.
Was this back when you had a temper?
No. Yes, it was. Anyways, I remember she said I had something like a sword for a tongue, or something like that. Because she's like, you'll get upset and you'll just go straight to saying the hardest things you can possibly come up with. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. I shouldn't talk like that. I should be better. I should be better.
Be better.
Yeah. So what's the difference between a good leader correcting someone versus a bad one? What have you guys seen?
I think it's where the intent lies. I've seen really terrible leaders give great advice, and I've seen really great leaders give bad advice. But I think where the good advice is always really appreciated and wholesome is when it's genuinely in an effort to help the person, not to tear the person down. And I think that must always be the difference, right? I mean, you just mentioned, right? We've all had this tendency in the past or maybe present where the correction isn't spirited in helping the person grow, it's spirited in pushing that person down. And I think that is the distinction for me. That it must be out of love for the person. I mean, that's why you prune the tree, right? You prune the tree for the tree.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me too, as I've gotten older, I am able to now hear somebody say something that I may not agree with about me or a situation. Hey, you need to do this or you should do that. I am at a point now where I can assess it and decide, even if it irritated me or even if I was like, they said that just to be a jerk, I can still say to myself now, yeah, but if you can grow, you should. And I think that isn't to pat myself on the back. That's just to say that at some point you have to realize that there, like you said, there are good leaders that give bad advice and there's bad leaders that give good advice. And if you can take something from somebody and learn, it's better off for you in the long run rather than just kind of being like I used to be, where you just shut down. As soon as I heard something I didn't like, I would just shut down and I would be like, whatever. And that makes you very difficult to actually work with, because people don't want to, I don't want to go talk to Pritchard about it. He just loses his temper.
Yeah.
So that is one of the things. So have either of you ever been corrected the wrong way? And if so, what did that feel like to you guys? Because I got a really good story.
What's jumping into my mind is just as a husband, as a dad, the times that I know that I've corrected the wrong way.
Oh yeah. And
so, like, to me, that stands out more than the times maybe if I was corrected, in an incorrect manner. That weighs more heavily on my mind than maybe the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I would have to reflect on what does it mean, the right way versus the wrong way, right? Because at the end of the day, if it helped me, even if it was really hard to hear and it maybe wasn't done in the most, useful style at the time, but if that spurned some reflection and ultimately change, I mean, that's the fruit, right? So, and I think that's what you're saying, right? Is we also have to have that wisdom to know, like, okay, throw the emotion out of it, throw the what we perceive to be a bias out, throw all the different, strip all the stuff, around that correction out. And then you're left sitting and looking at, okay, what is that correction specifically tell me about me?
Yeah.
And then at that point, I think it's important to make a decision. I mean, one thing I need to speak for myself. The older I've gotten, the less I care about if I hear certain things. I'm like, yeah, I know that, but that's who I am, as long as I'm not, breaking any laws or commandments or things of that nature. That's stylistic.
Right.
And I can't possibly try and adjust my style to please everybody.
Correct.
And so at some point we have to be comfortable in our own skin to say, yep, I know that about me, and I've got bigger issues that I'm trying to work out. That's relatively low on the priority list right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, I think it comes down to, having the maturity to look at it unemotionally and say, all right, is there truly a there that I need to be focused on? And I think if that ultimately does bear fruit, I think we should all be willing and humble enough to take whatever that feedback is and assess it and then make a decision.
Yeah. Well, I remember, and I was younger. I'd probably been in IT 3 or 4 years, and they asked me to fix this guy's daughter's computer, and he was pretty high up. It was a pretty big company, and he was second in command, and it was his granddaughter's computer, actually, and they wanted me to move all of her files from one computer to another, like image, and then move it over. And I was really, really good at that kind of stuff, like just running an Acronis or something like that and imaging it and moving it over. And she had some, 2,000-3,000 MP3s. And I remember seeing the hard drive flashing on the wrong hard drive. So I knew that I was writing back over the image, and I lost a whole bunch of her music. And my boss at the time, he comes in, and he understood that I had lost these files, and I was trying to get them back and everything. And he slammed the top of my monitor. You know, this was back when you had the big old CRTs. And he's like, "Get the files back." And I was like, thinking to myself, I was probably, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s. I was like, yeah, that's going to help me. I'm going to use some magic here. And now somehow the files are just going to come back.
Bang on it again. Maybe that'll help.
But to your point, what I learned from that, oh man, that camera shut off. What I learned from that is that I now measure twice, cut once. So I always make sure I double check things before I do them. So anyways, I think you can take something out of any situation and learn from it.
What do you guys think about correcting while you're either angry or emotional in the moment?
Yeah, personally, I think you need to take a step back and calm down.
Just your story kind of gave me, reason to think, because that's, I mean, you talk about the kids, right?
Right.
I mean, 90% of the times where I've been, disappointed with myself on how I handled correction or instruction with the kid, it was because I was emotional at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think for me, it's a situation. I always go back to the story about Abraham Lincoln, where they found that letter in the guy's desk.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd never sent it. And I mean, I think people lost their lives and everything from that situation, but he decided not to. And I think that's even what I do nowadays is I just don't write an email. I'll take a step back.
Yeah, or if you must write it, because sometimes that can be therapeutic as well, just getting it out, but don't send it.
Yeah.
Right, and that's exactly what Abraham Lincoln did, right? He wrote it. There's kind of like this therapy in that.
Yeah.
I know plenty of people who do that. Like, they bang away at their keyboard, they get it out, and they're like, okay, now I'm just going to sleep on it.
Yeah.
The next morning, you're like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
I'm not going to send that out.
Yeah. So what made you guys actually receive correction then instead of reject it? I think we've kind of talked about it.
What was reframe that?
Like what made you actually receive correction instead of reject it? And I think it goes.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think a lot of it's just mindset. I mean, I think I've always had the mindset that whether it was whatever way it was given, to put that aside and just take the correction and I know we're kind of joking about it, but again, we can always do better, right? Even I think of a story now with I had a manager and I probably had 95% of the business at this hospital. And to me, I thought that was pretty good. And they would continually always pick on that one little product that I didn't have. And so part of me was always like, why are you always complaining about that? I got 95% of the business. Mm-hmm. But they were right. I needed to go get, and eventually was able to go get that because whether it was given in the right way or not, there was some truth in that, of that there was still a little bit more business that I could go get there. And I needed to work on that just as hard as I had on that 95%.
Right.
So I think a lot of his mindset of just say, you know what, no matter how it's given, I can probably do better in this. I'm not perfect. I can always get better. And so having a mindset of just saying, you know what, I'm going to take people's opinions and maybe take out the emotion side of it and just listen to the facts of it. And can I improve?
Yeah. But the thing that we have to make sure that everybody remembers and understands is that what we're talking about is two areas really, or two planes, two different approaches. And as we have matured, we've been able to figure out it's better to take it, whether it's good feedback, bad feedback, and grow, or decide to let it go. That is something that you have to grow as an individual to be able to do that. The thing that everybody should remember, though, is that correction delivered the right way builds confidence, and the wrong way builds resistance. And I think that's what we're talking about is, well, we've matured as men, and I'm sure there's women out there that mature as well, that say, I can take this and I can figure it out. But as good leaders, as just diligent people, pruning, whatever the case you may need to prune, I think it's good for us to remember that you have to do it in a way that shows love, not just...
Yeah, I
Because
know.
the
Agreed.
bad kind can really hurt people too. Like
Forever.
really hurt. Yeah.
For a
There
long
are-
time. Yeah.
There are people, and if I thought long and hard enough about it, I'm sure I could come up with a few where, wow, that's really stung and still stings decades later, because it was just, yeah, sure, there was truth in it and all this, but why did they have to add all the other language around it that was really not intended to be helpful, but intended to be hurtful?
Yeah.
And you take those lessons too as a means of not repeating history on other people.
Well, this question is kind of in line with what you were talking about earlier. How does tone and timing impact correction received? How it's received?
I think timing is everything.
It really is.
There's a famous story. You guys know who Lou Gerstner is? Lou Gerstner was the ex-CEO of IBM. And he kind of took over IBM when they were kind of one of their downfalls. I want to say late 80s, early 90s, or may have been a little bit later than that. And IBM was like IBM back in those days, right? They were the kingpin of technology. And so they hire this guy, and he actually basically he steers the turnaround of the company. They're actually doing pretty well. Anyway, he had a sales rep, and sales rep had kind of quoted some other big company, one of the customers of theirs. And let's say, I forget the exact numbers, but let's say the numbers were the product cost $1 million. He accidentally, fat fingered the number and put it in writing that the customer only needed to spend $500,000. Eventually, the customer saw this, was like, okay, held them accountable to it, made them honor it. Lou Gerstner, at the CEO at the time, was like, yeah, I'll honor that. A few weeks went by, and Lou Gerstner was there with a few of his senior leaders, and they saw this sales guy still working there, and they asked him, like, are you not going to fire this guy? And he's like, fire this guy? Are you crazy? I just spent $500,000 training this guy. No way am I going to fire him. Right? And so I think timing and situations, you asked the question the other day or just earlier about, well, what can we do to build those relationships, right? I think the absolute number one thing we can do as leaders to build that relationship is when the chips are down, you have their back.
Yeah.
No matter what. That is not the time to give them that lesson of correction or instruction.
Right.
Be with them, help them, have their back. And then once everything is sorted out, that's the time.
Yeah.
Right. And that'll be far more memorable to them, both from a relationship standpoint, but also then from a lesson standpoint. If Lou Gerstner had fired that guy, what good would that have done the person?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think you said a key word earlier, Christopher, when you said embarrassment. No one wants to be embarrassed, and there is a difference between being embarrassed and being corrected, and those things can be happening simultaneously if the timing's wrong. So, to your point on the timing is because a lot of it is when you use the wrong timing, it creates an embarrassing situation. Maybe you're correcting in front of someone else or whatever it may be, and so, no one wants to be embarrassed.
Yeah. So thinking about encouragement versus judgment, and you kind of think about those two, like encouragement and pruning, it focuses on growth and helping build people up, whereas judgment focuses on kind of, finding flaws in people and kind of tearing them down. And I think it creates distance that sometimes is not repairable. So why do you think people default sometimes to judgment instead of encouragement?
Is there a difference? And if so, is it dependent on the relationship? I'm going to go back to that relationship word. Could the same thing be said by two different people, but if the person that has a close relationship versus the person who doesn't, is it received as correction or judgment based on that relationship?
Well, I think the relationship itself implies intent.
Right.
Right. And so I think intent is everything. And we as human beings are horrible at deducing someone's true intentions. Horrible. If you guys, there's this thing called the ladder of inference. I don't know if you've heard about it, but basically what it is, it's we as human beings, we will hear someone say something and then we'll infer what they mean or what their intent was. And then based on that inference, we then say, okay, well, my boss said that, whatever XYZ wasn't done correctly. Okay, so therefore I'm going to infer that he thinks that my performance is bad generally. Or then what I'm going to do is, based on that, I'm going to infer that, he doesn't like me. Then I'm going to just keep climbing this ladder of inference where I'm going to talk myself into the fact that I'm getting fired tomorrow, and so because, and that's when you have the relationship that kind of surrounds that, it really helps dismantle that internal dialogue of ladder of inference. Again, we as human beings, they did a study on this exact thing where they said, take a guess. One of the exercises that they give you to do as part of this, ladder of inference thing is, before you climb that ladder, just stop and go and ask a direct question to the person. Hey, you said this. This is what I'm telling myself based on that comment. Mm-hmm. Is that true? Did I miss something? Whatever it is. And generally speaking, that immediately stops that, and people can turn around and say, no, this is what I really meant, and this is what I want you to work on, etc. And they did studies on people where they try to have people kind of go through these exercises. And what they found was that people got the intent wrong 90% of the time.
Yeah.
90%. But to your point, Matthew, I think where there is a relationship, I think you can much, much more accurately predict the intent of why this person is giving me this advice or why XYZ is happening.
Because there's hopefully history in that relationship that has shown that in before.
Yeah, that they care.
Yeah, the person actually cares about you.
That's the whole that's the whole gospel of Jesus Christ, right? I mean, who here has any doubt what Christ's intent is in our life? Mm-hmm. Zero doubt what his intent is. And therefore, of course, Christ can correct me all day long, every day, for the rest of my life.
Right.
But because I know that that's coming out of a place of absolute, unquestioned love. And I think the same is true for parents.
Yeah.
Should be.
Yeah.
In most instances, I believe it is. Yeah. But I think for me, thinking about judgment versus encouragement, judgment is, to your point, I know your intent. And you come in and you're just like, I know why you did this. I mean, you're late today because you're lazy. Maybe you're late because traffic was bad or something personal happened and things like that. Can you be late every now and again? Sure. And I think if you have a good relationship with somebody, I think it's much easier to take. But I think the judgment portion or angle for me is that it feels like they know my intent, and you don't really know, because there's so many things I've done in my life where I actually did it with a good intention and it just turned out bad.
It just turned out bad.
Like I didn't mean it when I said it that way, I made a joke, or because I know it's odd, but I make jokes every now and again. And sometimes I've made jokes where I was like, no, I mean, I really was a joke. And Victoria always tells me, she's like, there's always a little bit of truth in your jokes. I'm like, no, there's like, not really.
Sometimes it's just a dumb joke.
Yeah. So have you ever shut down because of someone correcting you?
Yeah, I have. I had a boss, the worst boss I've ever had. I mean, that was the relationship. Just his way, the highway. Yeah. You could never please him. Everything you did was subpar, and you just shut down. It's like, okay, well, if that's the way it goes, then why try?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Usually when I feel like I'm in a situation like that, I'll begin my exit strategy. Like, okay, this isn't helping me. I need to move on. I need to get out of here. Because the thing with correction, it should leave you clear in understanding where you should go, not feeling smaller. Yeah. Like that's what pruning, when you think about it, that's just when you leave someone's office or the conversation with your wife or a brother or sister or whatever, you should be like, you know what? They're right. I need to change that or do better there.
Still hard to hear, but
yeah.
But that humility is what's important, right?
Yeah,
to say
absolutely.
They're right.
Well, and just seeing what you just said a second ago, and just going back to, it depends on how the person comes. I mean, and I think for us as being Christians first in our life, like God asks us to do, He prunes us more than anyone. and asks us to do some difficult things. But like you had said, we know the absolute love that God and Christ have for us.
Yeah.
And so even though it's difficult, and even in the time in the moment, you're like, do I really have to get pruned like this? This is, everything was going really good. Do I really have to suffer a little bit here? We know where it's coming from.
Right.
And so that thought just came, this, again, the power of whoever's doing the correction, us understanding where they're coming from. And even if it's difficult, if they're coming from the right place and we know their heart and their intent is because they love us, it's much more bearable.
So then that kind of goes into a question. What does good correction sound like?
I think it's situational, and I think it depends on the person, right? I think this is also where the relationship matters, right? Because just like trees, no two people are the same. So good correction might mean one thing to one person. Bad correction might mean something else. And I think that's where having that relationship is key, right? Understanding, is this a sensitive person? Well, what's going on in this person's mind or in this person's life? How does this person think? How clear and how candid can I really be with this person? So I think where you have that relationship where you truly understand, okay, well, what kind of mind or what kind of person am I imparting correction to? Being very sensitive and aware of that, because you may have the perfect spiel for correction. It works 100% of the time on Joe over here, and you try that same approach on Mary, and it doesn't land the same way. And so I think this is where taking the time to really understand the people, have the relationship with people, and that takes time. I think, and this is what we were saying earlier, right? I mean, we all have people in our lives where they don't know us from, their uncle, but they're more than happy to give us some guidance and advice and, instruction on where we need to improve.
Yeah.
They don't know, everything else that's going on. They don't know, maybe I'm already working on that. Maybe I'm already aware of that,
Right.
So I think it's situational, and I think it's very, very dependent on the person who's receiving the correction.
Yeah, I love it when I get advice from somebody and I'm like, hey, I got an idea. How about you just stop talking to me?
Yeah.
Well, like you think about different individuals. There's a guy that I work with, and he was like, look, I don't really like compliments. It makes me uncomfortable. He's like, I like treats. So just like, take him to lunch or
Flick the candy at him.
get him an iPad, things like that. So you do have to know, like, you really have to know your team and understand them. So I think it has to start with caring. I know that sounds really...
No. I think you're spot on, yeah.
But you have to start with, they have to know that you actually care about them. And that is one of the things that I try to do, like in the jobs that I have when I'm in leadership roles, is I want people to know I actually want the best for you. Like, I would do anything to help you. If you need me to come help you move some stuff at your house, I'll come do it.
So how do you cultivate that?
Well, so it's interesting. Like, one of the areas that I really focus on, there was a CEO of a company that I worked at. And at the time, we always laughed at it. But he said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you just you cultivate that culture over time by having team events, by reaching out to people. Just, I think, having top level meetings where you're top down and you go and sit with somebody. I try to have a very open door policy, like people are like, oh, well, he's a CTO. We don't want to, I'm like, what? I'm just a guy coming in. I put shoes and pants on just like everybody else.
Just don't catch him when he's in a bad mood.
Yeah.
That guy's got a temper.
Or if Kansas lost the night before, don't talk to him. So.
Yes. That is funny. Somebody came on a call or whatever, and they're like, hey, Kansas lost. I was just like, hang up. Yeah. But I think you have to be clear and you have to be specific. So you start with caring, then you have to be clear and specific. And I think the caring and kind of the culture, that has to be built over time. People have to know. And you have to understand that, like, when I took a job that I have now, they were like, hey, we understand you think things are going to change, but we've heard that before. So it had to take time. Remember, this guy told me proof is in the pudding. And so over time, they were like, okay, yeah, we see you mean what you say, and you're making changes here and things. So I think you have to build the culture, and the trust has to come, and it can't come. You can't dictate it. It's just like Victoria and I. She couldn't say, "Hey, trust me, I'll never hurt you." She could say that and be like, "Well, yeah." I mean, like, that's what people say.
when I think of correction, and for me, like, and there's not even a close second of an individual imparting a lesson to somebody, to have that somebody see with clear eyes the impact of their behavior. I always think of the message that Nathan delivered to David.
Yeah.
I mean, just so genius, right? But coming back to your question about, is there a right way? I think there's a few rules about what absolutely not to do. Number one, never make it personal.
Yeah.
Right? If there is something that has happened, that the something is the objective, right?
Yeah.
Never make it personal. And so there's this formula that is used in kind of business school called SBI, situation, behavior, impact, right? When you're having a conversation with someone, you want to give them, good feedback. Hey, this was the situation, this was your behavior, and this was the impact. Mm-hmm. And that can be either positive or negative, right? But you kind of have to try and frame it in that context, because that strips out all the personal part of it, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, objectively, this was the situation, this was your behavior, this was the impact of your behavior, and then you can kind of have that conversation. But again, I do think it's very, very important not to make it a personal attack.
Yeah, I think pruning and correction, it should come with direction, not just the criticism. So you can't just say, hey, you did this wrong.
Right.
You need to say, hey, you did this wrong, but you're also doing these things right. And just going forward, you need to do X, whatever it is. So I think that's something that it's really critical when you're dealing with different types of people. And I think it goes back to as well, you really have to know people, not on a deep personal level, but you have to understand what makes them tick, and how do you actually help them achieve more, higher levels and set stretch goals and things like that.
Have you guys ever had people that have worked for you that, you get carrot and, I believe this with all my heart, that there are carrot and stick people. Mm-hmm. And some people take the correction, it has to be dripping in honey and syrupy, because that's what's going to motivate them. At the end of the day, it's to try and help them move the ball down the field, right? And there are other people that, you just mentioned, some people just don't like the sweetness. Mm-hmm. But I've had people work for me that a good, firm conversation is exactly what they crave and need,
right,
in order to move. Have you ever experienced that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting because, like, for me, I need all the accolades. It's really, honestly, never enough. Like, it isn't. And that is interesting if I think about it, because we laugh, but it really is like a personality flaw that I have. Because growing up, all I wanted from my dad was, hey, good job. Or, those things. And I didn't get that. Every now and again, I did. But it's made me, in my life, have to be like, the reason that a person like me struggles and strives for those attaboys is because I don't personally think I'm doing that good of a job, or I'm, what I'm doing is not that, if people knew, the imposter syndrome, where if people just really knew me, and what I do and how I do things, anybody could do it. But it's the same thing I talk with my son about. That's not the truth. That's not the case. The thing is that differentiates me and others when you are excelling in life is that I'm willing to do the things that a lot of people don't want to do. Just the little things, just sending that follow-up email, or setting a goal, or, following up on that meeting and things like that. But that's been something that I've struggled with.
Validation
forever.
Is huge, man.
It really
so
is
important. Even people who say they don't need it, everyone needs to know that, hey, what you're doing matters.
Yeah.
And you're on the right track. Thank you. Just keep that up. And I think we all need validation
Yep, I agree.
because that's what builds confidence at the end of the day.
So why do you guys, how do you think you filter truth from tone? Because that goes back to what I said earlier, where sometimes somebody will say something that I'm like, this person's just being a jerk, but that's their tone, it's their delivery. Maybe there's something in it.
Do you think most people know? I'll kind of answer your question with a question and then maybe circle back to this one. Do you think people know most of the time the feedback that they're getting that there's truth in that? Like deep down, do you think people be like, yeah, I can see that? Or do you think people are like, absolutely not? You're talking about the wrong guy over here.
I think there's two variables in there. I think if it's being delivered incorrectly and you immediately tune out, then whatever's being said isn't going to hit, right? I think we've talked about that, right? So when we had somebody who was, like a boss or whatever it was, you immediately begin to tune out. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. I don't care.
Or get defensive.
Yeah. Or, or maybe a coach or whatever it was, versus if you like my wife, like Betsy, and I've gotten better, I think, as I've gotten older, but especially early on when I was, younger, I didn't want to hear any correction from her. I was like, who are you to say, anything to me, And so, but I would hear her, and my immediate response would be like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm not that bad. I'm not this. But give it a few hours, and I'd be like, man, she's right. And so I heard it. It just took me a while to truly hear it and stop being so defensive.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it goes back to delivery versus, again, if you don't want to hear the person, you're not going to hear the person.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if y'all knew this, but I coached high school boys basketball for like 7-8 years. I don't know if I ever told y'all that or not, but as we're hearing this piece made me think about how every season, each of those boys, I would have to learn how I could push their buttons, how I could get more out of them. Mm-hmm. And some kids, it was like I could chew on them, and that's how they would respond.
Yeah.
And there would be other guys, if I chewed on them, they would fold. And so it had to be a different, it had to be the arm around the shoulder or whatever. It's like, hey, soft or whatever it was. But I had to spend time every year learning each of them to know, how can I get the most out of them? Right. And if I just did, if I just chewed everyone out, maybe one or two kids would respond, and everyone else I would lose. Mm-hmm. So it takes time to, if you are going to be a leader in that position, it takes time to learn your team to understand how they are going to respond. Who wants the sweetness? Who just wants the information? Who needs a slap on the back? Hey, good job versus,
Yeah.
So
which one are you?
I'm more just tell me what I need to do, and if I trust you, then I'll fix it. But I do like swag as well, so I do like the gifts.
Well, I think growth requires humility. So even if whatever the message is that's given to you, if it's right, you got to sometimes look past how it was if it wasn't delivered perfectly. And I think that's something that I've tried to grow as an individual and take in, because I'm very much a type of person, the way it's delivered, I'll just shut down. I'll be like, I don't hear you. This is all I hear. The peanuts. That's all I hear.
But when you think about Matthew 18, right, there's a lot of emphasis on the person delivering the bad news. Mm-hmm. Like that's the central kind of theme, is delivering. But what if we can learn something about what it means to actually receive that?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you're asking, right? So how do you receive that? And I think there's some wisdom in, regardless of who's saying it, how they're saying it, to try and strip out all the other stuff. And that's why I asked the question. Do you think people deep down have a gut and they know what you're saying is true?
I've thought about that many a time, because I used to think about whether or not, is this person really, they don't see it? Or do they see it and they're just defensive, or they just feel bad, or, I don't know. And that's the thing. That's why judgment, it's impossible to judge somebody because you don't know their heart. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what they're thinking. So I like to look at people and say, most people, not all, most people, and say, yeah, I think they want to do better, but maybe they're just struggling right now. I don't know. What about you?
I mean, the right answer is we're better off if we try to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? Of just like, you know what, we're all struggling, and none of us are perfect. We're far from it, and so. But I think there's also some people that are just completely blind to it as well. There's a self-righteousness of like, you know, I don't have anything to work on. You've got all the problems, and so, you know, which is a dangerous place to be too. So. But like I said, yeah. But again, we can't judge that person because we don't. Again, you said we don't know their heart. Only God knows, and so you just try to give people the benefit of the doubt of like, you know what, you're just struggling too.
I've given people kind of correction or direction or constructive criticism before, and I've had one person turn around and say, "Yeah, I don't agree." I'm like, okay, well. I mean, it's pretty objective. This happened. No, I don't agree with that. Like, I mean, I had a boss who told me one time, she goes, I can teach anyone anything. The one thing I cannot teach is self-awareness.
Yeah.
She's tough. Like, if people do not have self-awareness, she's like, very difficult to work for that. And that's what I would encourage people who are maybe looking to, you know, improve their lives is start with self-awareness. Be aware of thyself. There's a reason why every 13-step program starts with the very first step is recognition of the fact that there is a problem.
Yeah.
If you don't get to step 1, you're not going to graduate to step 13. And that sometimes is the hardest thing, right? I mean, coming back to your question about why do you think people see negative instructional guidance or criticism as a bad thing is because I think there's a lot of people, if not most people, walk around life thinking that they don't have any issues. At least they want to pretend that they don't have any issues. So for someone else to vocalize, oh, you are imperfect, that's a sting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So do you guys think you've experienced more growth from just life situations or from people helping you grow?
Oh, 100% people. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say a combination, but I mean, probably more, I think more people because, yeah, it has to be because even in those tough situations,
People are involved.
Yeah. And whether you ask for advice or someone just sticks by your side through it, whatever it is. Yeah. We can't go through this life by ourselves.
Yeah.
What about self-pruning?
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah. But you get what I'm asking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's very, now I'm not talking about kind of beating ourselves down, but we've spoken about meditation and thoughtfulness and all these other things, you know, a couple episodes ago. But I think there was a time and a place for coming back to self-awareness. Like maybe let me not wait for someone to tell me I have this problem if I know I have this problem.
Right. Yeah,
let me try and figure this out.
We have a responsibility. Yeah. Whenever we see something in our lives. Yeah. I was thinking about that. Just, I know you sent some notes out this morning. I was thinking about that. I'm glad you brought that up because first that part of my life is like, okay, whether you want to be successful in school, in business, if you want to be a leader, a CEO, if you want to be a better Christian, whatever it is, you have to be able to recognize, okay, I've got weaknesses and I've got things I need to fix. I need to repair. And there's going to be things that like I need to get rid of. Like if I want to, you know, get all A's and go to masters, well, I can't play video games 6 hours, you know, every night. I've got to get rid of that. So we all have things that we have to, and maybe that's self-pruning, right? Getting rid of the things in our lives that we know are holding us back from accomplishing whatever we have set our minds on.
And sometimes, humanly speaking, we may be the only people that know that we have those issues, right? I mean, there's no one that I know of that can read my mind. No one knows the thoughts that are going on in my mind but me and God.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, you know, there is a moment where there are some issues that people are never going to call me out on, but I have to call myself out on those things. I have to examine myself and say, okay, well, I've got these issues before they manifest into something bigger that will potentially impact people. I've got to have the self-discipline to do some self-pruning.
Yeah.
And sometimes those can be the hardest. I mean, I think back in times in my life where I knew something was, I was just me. I knew I had some things going on wrong in my life and no one else knew about. And it, everyone else was like, oh, Matthew's, he's a great guy. Right. But inside, like, it was wearing me down because it was like, but I'm not, because, I've got these secrets that no one else knows that I'm ashamed of, that I want to, I need to get rid of. So I think, that's a really important point of the self-pruning aspect of, because if you don't get rid of those things, those will eat away at you.
I mean, isn't that what Passover and the days of
100%
are all about?
Yeah, this time of year.
Reflecting and looking at yourself and understanding. Because for me, I will do things wrong. I'll have those secrets that I will be battling, and they will manifest themselves in other ways. I'll be short-tempered. Just little things like that. And I find, yes, we could call it self-pruning. I think it's more self-reflection, self-awareness, and basically taking the time. But the thing that I think is really important too is when you do that with yourself, because you don't beat yourself up, but do it with care, the same way you would with anybody else. Don't just come at it with, anger and, man, you're worthless and you're never going to get this right, and you just tear yourself down. Talk to yourself the same way that you would to somebody who you love and want more for and care about and things like that.
And just kind of going back to how individuals are, right? I mean, Matthew, you mentioned that like some of the guys on your team were kind of the stick approach, others weren't. But I think it's so important to know, maybe the most important to know, which are the people that if you give them something will be the people that will beat themselves down on just the smallest amount. And we've all heard the saying, right? We're all our worst, our worst own critic. I think understanding who those people are, that you don't want to sow a seed in their mind that's then going to spiral out of control, that just kind of destroys their spirit.
Yeah, because again, like part of being a leader in whatever facet of life we're talking is being an encourager.
Yeah.
I mean that's. I mean, Jesus was an encourager. We think about the woman caught in adultery, the woman at the well. I mean, he didn't bash them. He, talked to them, and then at the end, he was like, "You need to stop doing this." But he was very loving and encouraging to them in that moment.
Yeah. Well, I think growth comes from life and people. We just have to be willing to receive it sometimes. And I think that's where the self-reflection. So you made mention of something earlier, and I was just going to say, how do you correct someone who takes it the worst way every time? No matter how you deliver it, they still take it as whatever. What do you guys do in those situations?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself the question, is it actually beneficial in that scenario to give that feedback? And if you've able to answer that honestly, that it's more beneficial for me to give it than not, then I really like what you were saying about a leader's job being an encourager, right? I think that it has to be paramount in that, right? If they're going to take it the wrong way, meaning, look, there's a very simple ways you can kind of split that, right? Taking the wrong way, saying, oh, well, the only reason you're telling me that is because you're judging me.
Yeah.
Or take it the wrong way could also mean just this is going to eat them alive. I think understanding how they might take that the wrong way would maybe change my approach. If there's also a lot of wisdom that says correct not a fool.
Yeah.
Lest he hate you. Right? And there's those situations too, right?
Yeah.
Where you can clearly see people doing things wrong, but you already know if you were to say anything to that person, it's not going to change anything except for how they see you. And so I think there needs to be some wisdom exercise as well, just to say, I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
Because it's just not going to help.
Yeah. So do you think in that situation, because yes, sometimes it's better to just not say anything, But what if you take that person aside and say, look, here's the situation. Whenever I correct you, I'm not trying to tear you down. I'm actually trying to help you. But no matter the situation, you always take it the worst. How do we get past that? That is one of the things that I've learned to do, is ask people and just say the things that are really kind of uncomfortable. Like you can't seem to take any kind of advice. Why is that? Like, what do you think that is? Mm-hmm. And put it on them, where they're like, I mean, I didn't really know I did that. Or I don't know. Have you guys ever done that? It's kind of an uncomfortable thing to do. But
yeah, I was just thinking more of like at some point there's a consequence. You know, if you're giving the criticism in the correct way, and they just continually refuse to listen or whatever, eventually there's a consequence, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not going to be employed anymore. You're gonna have to kind of separate that relationship if it's a relationship thing or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That's not exactly what you were saying, but that's what was in my mind. If like at some point we have to make corrections.
Yeah.
You know, and if we don't, then there's going to be a consequence on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's critical to think about that, and to, you know, like sometimes I think we may be afraid of hurting people's feelings too, like even leaders, because the thing is this is about how do people get better as leaders, whether it's husband or father, wife, mother, work, brother, sister, or whatever. How do you get better in life? And sometimes there's things that we just don't want to say and do because it's uncomfortable, but it still needs to be said and done in a loving, caring way. I think that's really critical.
Did you ever, you mentioned the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Did you ever do that vulnerability exercise with any of your teams? How did that go? I mean, and maybe just explain what it is, but...
Go.
Okay, well, I was going to say, maybe you want to... Okay, I'll go. So in the book, they recommend one of the best ways that you can kind of build trust is vulnerability. We spoke a little bit about vulnerability over the weekend. And there's this exercise, I'm probably going to get it wrong, so jump in, Chris, but there's this exercise where you go around, you have your team, direct reports, whatever it is, and you start off an exercise where you, as the leader, you basically say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I think I bring to the table, this is what I think I do well, these are the things that I think I need to work on. Mm-hmm. And then you just put it on the table and you let the rest of the team respond to it. And so you're basically initiating that feedback, right? You're in the negative feedback. You're initiating it. You're kind of creating that space. And then you're supposed to go around the table or the room and everyone else do that. Mm-hmm. I did that a couple of years ago. And what was amazing to me was, it ended up taking 3 hours and I only have 5 direct reports. And so that was astonishing, because what was interesting to me is when people are willing to put themselves out there and say, hey, this is what I think my faults are. What was amazing to me was everyone in the room immediately went back to, okay, but these are the things you do well. Yeah, you do these and you do these and you know, you could do this better. But everyone kind of naturally, even as we went around the room, tended to gravitate towards the encouragement part of it. Mm-hmm. How did your exercise go when you did it?
Well, so for a while I was doing, the whole leadership development and personal growth. So I would fly to all these different companies and kind of talk with people and sit with the leadership groups. Some of them were like, you have to narrow it. It's actually good. 5 to maybe 8 people is about what you want. Maybe 10 to 11. But I did one where there was like 65 people and it just was too much. But I did some different vulnerability exercises. Mm-hmm. Those are really, really good, though, because they help your team get to know each other in a way that you may have worked with somebody for 10 or 15, 20 years. Yeah. I was doing one, and I asked 3 simple questions. How many brothers and sisters do you have? Are you the oldest, middle, or youngest? And what's the toughest thing you've faced in life without getting too personal up to this point? And then you go around, and it always gets me every time. We were wondering when I was going to cry. I'm not going to cry. But I was doing it at this company, and, they were kind of going through. And they got to this one guy, and he was like, well, it's interesting because especially if they're the oldest, they're the only child, or they're the youngest,
Says a lot.
or they're the middle.
Yeah, you can learn a
You
lot.
can usually assess,
Yeah.
oh, that's why they're like that, or that's
Yeah.
why they react to this. That's why, youngest, we get our way. Oldest always is willing to sacrifice and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Well, they were going around, and this one guy was like, I'm such and such child. I have a brother and a sister, and I'm the middle or the youngest. I don't remember what he said, but he goes, but my sister lost a child a few years ago. And he said, it's the toughest thing I have ever faced in my life. And he got choked up. And then the rest of his team started putting their hands around him. And they're like, we didn't even know. And he's like, yeah, I didn't really want to talk about it. And I just kind of wanted to, push through. But he's like, it's been tough. And then this other guy was sitting across, and he was kind of the guy. And he was like, you let me know, man. You need anything, I will be there for you.
Sweet.
And it was just awesome to see.
Yeah.
And the team kind of helped grow. That's why, the whole 5 dysfunctions and the vulnerability side of things, it really, like, people, if they know you care and they know more about you, it's better. And especially if you think about it, you spend a lot of time, 8 hours a day with people that you work with on a regular basis. That is one of the things that is a struggle with all these remote workers now. You don't get that.
I agree.
That time to really just hang out in the office. So I think it's...
And I think a lot of people see it as a great benefit. And I think this, talking about remote work now, there is a lot of benefit to be able to work remote. But the people, in my experience, that suffer the most are the junior people.
Yes.
Who think their value are benefiting the most. Those are the ones that suffer because, to your point, they don't have that water cooler conversation, that mentorship, I can pop into someone's office and write on the whiteboard and have kind of a casual conversation. You don't get to know people at a relationship level. It's very transactional. I mean, during COVID, that's what I found about people is like you were just going from meeting to meeting to meeting, and every meeting had an agenda and had very specific things we were trying to get through, and you just didn't have that gap space in between to just chat with people.
Yep.
Yeah, we have time for a story. I just thought of this, and I think it's a cool story. So I may be trying to fit this, circle story into a square peg here. But I think that the biggest thing is what we've talked about is knowing the person. If you're going to give criticism, knowing the person, not assuming that you know how they want to, receive it or not. And I was just thinking about this. One of the years, a couple of years, I was coaching. It was a small private school, so everyone made the team. And we had a young man on the team, and he'd had as an infant he had a brain injury, so he was a little slow and but loved basketball and was just a great kid. But he was the kid that if we were ahead by 30 or behind by 30, that's when he got to play the last couple of minutes. And I would always put him in his senior year, especially. I would try to give him a few minutes, and was just always very just encouraging. If he messed up or dribbled it out of bounds or set up out of bounds or whatever it may have been, it'd be like, hey, that's fine, no problem, just keep trying. And I'll never forget, his mom came to me and said, he said, he doesn't think that you really care about him like the other players. And I'm like, dude, I love your son. Like, what do you mean? I mean, it hit me.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you never yell at him. He was like, Coach never yells at me like he does all the other guys. And I'm like, he wants me to yell at him. And she was like, yeah, I mean, if you can. And so I remember there was another game we had a good team that senior year. So we had some blowouts. So I remember I put him in and he messed up, and I called timeout, and they come in and I kind of lay into him. I mean, all the other players are like looking at me like, you're horrible. The moms and dads behind us or whatever, probably like, what has got into Matthew? He had the biggest smile on his, I'll never forget that. And just this biggest smile on his face. Yeah. Because in that moment, he was like,
part of the team.
Coach cares about me.
Yeah.
I'm part of the team.
That's awesome.
And I remember his mom came over later and said, thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, everyone probably thinks I'm a horrible human being right now, but I don't care because he smiled. But to the point of that is I thought I knew what he needed.
Yeah.
I thought I knew what would help him to react and improve. And it turned out to be the exact opposite because to your point, because you had just said, have those uncomfortable conversations. I never asked him, how do you want me to coach you?
Yeah.
What will make you better? what'll make you feel like you're an important part of the team?
Yeah.
I never asked that question. I just assumed I knew.
Yeah.
Such a great story.
Yeah,
good.
it is. That was. I said I'll never forget that smile. That was well worth it.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought? And just I remember the other guys just like looking at me like he is coach is awful.
Yeah.
He's just
That's
ripping
awesome.
into it.
We're up by 45, coach. It's okay.
Yeah, it's all right.
Well, I think that's about it for this episode. I appreciate that story. It was really, really good. And I think what we need to remember is great people don't avoid correction. They just learn how to grow from it. And so I think that's a good takeaway that we can have. But I appreciate you guys being here.
Absolutely. It was fun.
Yeah, enjoyed
Thank
it
you,
as
guys.
always.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciated Matthew and Stephen being a part of this conversation. We're looking forward to many more episodes. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you have questions, you can submit them at info@karposlifepodcast.com. We'll see you next month.